deep in the dark. The sun had just set, casting long shadows over the dense forest. Sarah and her friends, Mike and Lisa, had set up camp by the edge of a small, murky lake deep within the woods. They had heard stories about these woods, tales of strange noises, mysterious disappearances, and eerie sightings. But like most urban legends, they brushed them off as mere folklore, perfect for sharing around a campfire. As the darkness settled in, the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. "All right, who's got the scariest story tonight?" Mike asked, grinning as he tossed another log onto the fire. The flames crackled and danced, casting flickering light onto their faces. "I've got one," Lisa said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ever heard of the Wraith of the Woods?" Sarah and Mike shook their heads, leaning in closer. "They say," Lisa began, "that a long time ago, a woman named Eliza lived in a cabin not far from here. She was shunned by the local villagers, accused of witchcraft. One night they dragged her into the woods and left her to die. Her spirit, filled with rage and sorrow, is said to still haunt these woods, seeking revenge on anyone who dares to enter." The group fell silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl. Sarah shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "That's just a story," Mike said, trying to sound nonchalant but failing to hide the unease in his voice. "There's no such thing as ghosts." Just as he spoke, a sudden gust of wind blew through the camp, making the flames flicker wildly. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees and the forest grew deathly quiet. "Maybe we should call it a night," Sarah suggested, trying to keep her voice steady. They extinguished the fire and retreated to their tents, but sleep did not come easily. Sarah lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of Eliza and the Wraith of the Woods. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made her heart pound in her chest. Sometime in the middle of the night, Sarah was jolted awake by a low, mournful wail. It sounded like a woman crying, her voice filled with pain and anger. Sarah sat up, straining to hear more. The sound came again, closer this time. "Mike, Lisa," she whispered. But there was no response from the other tents. Gathering her courage, she unzipped her tent and stepped out into the cold night air. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the campsite. The crying continued, drawing her towards the dark, tangled woods. "Hello," she called out softly. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. Sarah's breath came in short gasps as she scanned the trees, her eyes struggling to penetrate the darkness. She took a few tentative steps forward, her flashlight casting long, sinister shadows on the ground. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and filled with torment. Her hair was matted and her clothes were tattered, hanging off her skeletal frame. "Eliza?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. The figure stared at her for a moment, then began to move closer. Sarah's legs felt like lead rooted to the spot. She wanted to run, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the apparition. "Why are you here?" the ghostly woman hissed, her voice echoing through the trees. "Why do you disturb my resting place?" "We didn't mean to," Sarah stammered. "We didn't know." "Lies!" Eliza's voice grew louder, filled with fury. "You are like the rest, here to torment me." Suddenly, a bone-chilling scream pierced the air. Sarah whipped around to see Mike and Lisa stumbling out of their tents, their faces pale with terror. The ghost of Eliza raised her arms, and the ground beneath them began to shake. "We have to get out of here," Mike shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her away. They ran blindly through the forest, the haunting cries of Eliza echoing behind them. Branches scratched at their faces and clothes, but they didn't stop until they burst out of the trees and onto the edge of the lake. They collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. The night was eerily silent once more, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the shore. "What the hell was that?" Lisa panted, her eyes wide with fear. "The Wraith," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "It's real." As they sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, a dense fog began to roll in from the lake, obscuring their view of the forest. The temperature dropped even further and a feeling of dread settled over them. "We need to leave," Mike said urgently. "Now." They scrambled to their feet and hurried back to the campsite, their flashlights barely cutting through the thickening fog. They packed up their gear as quickly as they could, their hands shaking with fear. Panic surged through Sarah, and she tore herself away from the ghostly grip, sprinting towards the car with Mike and Lisa close behind. They piled into the vehicle, and Mike fumbled with the keys, his hands trembling. The engine roared to life, and they sped down the narrow dirt road, the fog closing in around them. As they drove, the ghostly figure of Eliza appeared in the rearview mirror, her eyes glowing with malevolent rage. The car swerved as Mike tried to keep his eyes on the road, but the apparition vanished as quickly as it had appeared. They didn't stop driving until they reached the safety of their hometown, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. They parked the car and sat in stunned silence, the events of the night replaying in their minds. "We're never going back there," Lisa said finally, her voice shaky. Sarah nodded in agreement, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't truly escaped. The image of Eliza's tormented face haunted her thoughts, and the memory of her chilling words echoed in her mind. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she heard a faint, mournful wail outside her window. She sat up, her heart pounding. The sound grew louder, filling her room with its eerie presence. She got up and looked out the window, expecting to see the familiar streets of her neighborhood. But instead, she saw the dark, tangled woods and the murky lake, just as they had been the night before. And standing at the edge of the trees was Eliza, her hollow eyes fixed on Sarah. "You cannot escape me," Eliza whispered, her voice carrying on the wind. "You are mine now." Sarah backed away from the window, her blood running cold. She knew then that no matter how far she ran, the wraith of the woods would always find her. The darkness of the forest had claimed her, and there was no escape from its haunting grasp. Deep in the dark, where the line between the living and the dead blurred, Sarah realized she was forever bound to the tormented spirit of Eliza, a chilling reminder that some stories are more than just folklore. They are a terrifying reality.
If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We'll be back with more fascinating stories from the world of crime. Until then, stay curious and stay safe.